My name is Sarah. For 6 years, I paid for their mortgage without missing a single payment. I covered the property tax bills they couldn't afford. I even transferred $75,000 from my savings to prevent the bank from taking their home. But when my father stood in his living room, pointed at the door, and shouted that I wasn't really part of this family anymore, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply smiled, drove home, and canceled every automatic payment I'd been making since I was 28 years old. What happened next? Well, let's just say bank statements don't lie, even when families do. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was supposed to be a regular Sunday dinner, the kind I'd been attending faithfully twice a month for years, despite the hour-long drive each way and the early Monday meetings I'd have to prep for later that night. April in Portland brings that misty rain that isn't quite enough for an umbrella but still manages to soak through your jacket if you stay outside too long. I'd brought dessert, a handmade raspberry cheesecake that took 3 hours to perfect, and a bottle of my father's favorite whiskey as a small surprise. I remember hesitating before ringing the doorbell, not because I sensed what was coming, but because I needed that extra moment to switch from Sarah Chen, marketing director who'd just closed a 6-figure deal on Friday, to just Sarah, daughter, and sister, the role that somehow always required more performance than my actual career. My mother answered, her smile genuine but tired around the edges. "You're right on time," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like garlic and the lavender perfume I'd given her for Christmas. "Your brother just got here too." The house looked the same as always. The faded blue walls in the entryway. My mother had been talking about repainting for a decade. The scuff marks on the hardwood floor from moving furniture that was too heavy. The family photos arranged chronologically along the staircase wall. Photos I had framed and hung myself during a week-long vacation 3 years ago, when I'd also paid to have the roof repaired while my parents were visiting my aunt in Tacoma. In the living room, my father sat in his recliner, the new one I'd ordered when his back problems started getting worse, watching a baseball game with the volume too high. He nodded at me without getting up. My brother Jason lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his wife Emily beside him looking bored already. "There she is," Jason said without looking up. "Always just in time for the food." I ignored the jab and placed the cheesecake on the coffee table. "How's the tutoring business going?" I asked Emily, who had started a small after-school program for elementary students earlier that year. A program I'd helped fund with a $10,000 loan that we both knew would never be repaid. "It's fine," she said, finally making eye contact. "We're thinking of expanding, actually." I could see the request forming before she even spoke it. But my father interrupted, muting the TV. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying that edge I'd learned to recognize from childhood, the one that meant he was already irritated about something I hadn't yet discovered. "Your mother tells me you can't make it to Jason's anniversary party next month." I set my purse down slowly. "I've got that conference in Chicago, Dad, the one I've been planning for 8 months. I told everyone about it at Christmas." My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I thought maybe you could fly back early, honey. It's their 10-year anniversary. The whole family will be there." The silence that followed made it clear that the whole family was a mandate, not a description. I'd already rearranged 3 major client meetings to be at this dinner. I'd declined a speaking opportunity in London the month before to attend my nephew's birthday. I'd used half my vacation days last year helping my parents move into the renovated master bedroom, the renovation I'd paid for when my father's arthritis made climbing stairs too difficult. "I can't reschedule a national conference where I'm giving the keynote address," I said, keeping my voice even. "I've already sent Jason and Emily an anniversary gift. It should arrive next week." The gift was a weekend package at the Coastal Resort where they'd honeymooned. $3,200 for the ocean suite, spa treatments, and private dining. But I didn't mention that. Jason snorted. Of course. Throw money at it and call it handled. That's your solution to everything. I turned to look at him, genuinely confused. What's that supposed to mean? My father cut in before Jason could answer. It means you think your career makes you too important for family obligations. Always have. Something in his tone made me straighten my spine, a reflex from years of similar conversations. That's not fair. I've never missed anything important. I rescheduled the Tokyo trip for Mom's surgery. I worked remotely for 2 weeks when you needed help with the insurance claim after the storm. My father stood up, his face flushing. And you never let us forget it, do you? Always the martyr, always keeping score. I don't keep score, I said, though the irony wasn't lost on me. If anyone had been keeping score, they'd know just how much I'd given, financially, emotionally, practically, without ever asking for credit. My mother stepped forward, her peacemaking instincts kicking in. Let's have dinner. Everything's getting cold. But my father wasn't finished. 10 years, Sarah. Your only brother has been married for 10 years, building a family, being present. While you're off collecting promotions and frequent flyer miles. I looked at Jason, expecting at least some discomfort at being held up as the family standard, but he just shrugged as if to say, he's not wrong. Emily studied her nails. Dad, I have responsibilities. To who? To what? Not to this family, clearly. The room fell silent except for the muted baseball players moving across the TV screen. No one defended me. Not my mother, who knew exactly how much I helped. Not Jason, who'd called me just last month asking for advice on his resume, when he was considering a job change. Not Emily, whose business cards I'd designed myself. In that moment, I saw us all clearly. The roles we'd been assigned, the narrative that had been written. No matter what I contributed, I would always be cast as the absentee daughter, too ambitious, too independent, not family-oriented enough. My father pointed toward the door, his voice rising. If you can't be there for the important moments, then maybe you're not really part of this family anymore. Maybe you should just go focus on your precious career and leave the family stuff to people who actually care. The words hung in the air. Not because they were new. Similar sentiments had been implied dozens of times before, but because they'd finally been said outright. The unspoken contract had been voiced. My place in the family was conditional on perfect attendance, regardless of what I contributed otherwise. I didn't shout back. I didn't cry. I simply picked up my purse and looked at each of them in turn. Dinner smells delicious, Mom. I'm sorry I won't be staying. I walked out, closing the front door gently behind me. The cheesecake stayed on the coffee table, the whiskey unopened in its gift bag. In my car, I sat watching the rain collect on the windshield, forming small rivers that raced toward the wipers. I felt oddly calm, as if a question I'd been avoiding for years had finally been answered. The drive home gave me time to think. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. About the money, yes, the thousands of dollars that flowed from my accounts to theirs each month, but more about the pattern. About how I'd become both essential and invisible. Necessary, but never sufficient. My apartment was quiet when I returned, the Sunday evening light casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I'd bought this place 3 years ago, after my promotion to director. 2 bedrooms with a view of the river, more space than I needed. But I'd wanted room for family to stay when they visited. They never had. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The list of scheduled payments appeared on the screen, a digital record of my silent support. Riverside Mortgage Company, $2,250 monthly property tax fund, $780 monthly home insurance, premium, $220 monthly emergency medical fund, $500 monthly, family vacation account, $400 monthly, 5 years ago, when my father lost his job and the foreclosure notices started arriving, I'd stepped in without hesitation. I took out a personal loan for $75,000 to clear their second mortgage entirely. Then I set up automatic payments for their primary mortgage and related expenses, all while maintaining my own apartment, my own bills, my own life. They'd accepted it with relief, then embarrassment, then entitlement, in that order. Within a year, it had become the unspoken arrangement. I paid. They lived. No one mentioned it. I clicked on each payment, one by one. Each brought up the same confirmation window. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? Each time, I clicked yes. Not in anger, but with a strange sense of clarity, as if adjusting a picture that had been hanging crooked for years. The final one, the mortgage payment, I hesitated over longest. $2,250 every month for 62 months. $139,500 in total, not including the lump sum loan. Money I could have used for a down payment on a house with a yard, or invested for early retirement, or used to start my own business someday. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? I clicked yes. Then I closed my laptop, made a cup of tea, and slept better than I had in years. Monday morning arrived with its usual demands. Emails to answer, meetings to prepare. 4. A conference call with the East Coast team that couldn't be rescheduled. I threw myself into work with a focus that my colleagues noticed and appreciated. No one knew that anything had changed. No one could see the weight that had lifted. My mother called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. Her messages were casual, as if nothing had happened. Just checking in. Wondering if you got home okay. Nothing about what my father had said. Nothing about the dinner I'd missed or the dessert I'd left behind. I texted back, all good, busy week ahead. Talk soon. Wednesday morning, my brother called. Unusual enough that I almost answered out of concern, but I let it go to voicemail too. His message was less casual. Hey, Mom and Dad were wondering if you could stop by this weekend. Dad's got some papers he needs your signature on or something. Call me back. I didn't. Instead, I met my friend May for lunch, someone who'd known me since college, before promotions and mortgages and familial obligations had complicated everything. You look different, she said, as we settled into our corner booth at the Thai place we both loved. Lighter somehow. I told her everything, over pad Thai and spring rolls. About the dinner, about my father's words, about the canceled payments, about the years of financial support that had never translated to actual respect. May listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her expression shifting from surprise to understanding to something like pride. I've been waiting for this day, she said finally. Do you know how many times I've watched you bend yourself into knots for them while getting nothing back? How many vacations you've canceled? How many opportunities you've passed up? I pushed the noodles around my plate. I thought that's what family meant, supporting each other. Supporting each other, she emphasized. Not one person carrying everyone else while being treated like they're the problem. Her words landed with unexpected weight. Not because they were new, she'd expressed similar sentiments before, but because I was finally ready to hear them. You know what the strangest part is? I said. I'm not even angry. I'm just awake. That evening, I found a large manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside were bank statements. Dozens of them, going back years. Each one highlighted my deposits, my payments, my contributions, along with a handwritten note. I didn't know. We need to talk. I set the envelope aside. Not out of spite, but because I needed time. Time to decide what kind of relationship I wanted going forward, what boundaries would look like, what forgiveness might require. The following Tuesday, the first notice arrived at their house. My mother called immediately. Sarah, there's been some kind of mistake. The bank says the mortgage payment is late. Your father is on the phone with them now. I took a deep breath. It's not a mistake. Mom, I canceled the payment. Silence stretched between us, taut and uncomfortable. I don't understand, she said finally. Your father handles all that. No, Mom. I've been making the mortgage payments for over 5 years. I've been paying the property taxes, the home insurance, and putting money aside for your medical expenses. Another long silence. Then, that can't be right. Your father would have told me. I didn't argue. I simply said, check the bank statements I know you've been looking at. The ones you sent me. Look at where the money has been coming from all this time. 2 days later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail, but there was no message. Just the notification of a missed call, like a period at the end of a sentence. He tried again the next day. This time, he left a message. His voice strained in a way I'd never heard before. Sarah, it's Dad. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the finances. We should talk. Call me back. I didn't call back. Instead, I spent the weekend gathering documents. Not for confrontation, but for clarity. Every transfer, every payment, every loan documented in a spreadsheet. Total support over 5 years. $226,700. Not including smaller gifts, dinners, vacations I'd paid for, or the countless practical help that couldn't be quantified. I wasn't planning to present them with a bill. I simply needed to see it all in one place to understand the magnitude of what had been taken for granted. The following Wednesday, I came home to find my parents' car parked outside my apartment building. They were sitting on the bench near the entrance, looking smaller somehow. Older. My mother stood when she saw me, her face a complex mixture of emotions. My father remained seated, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. We need to talk, my mother said, her voice tentative in a way I wasn't used to. I nodded and led them upstairs to my apartment. They'd only been there twice before, once when I first moved in, and once for a brief stop when we were headed somewhere else. They looked around now as if seeing it for the first time, taking in the art on the walls, the plants thriving near, the windows, the books lining the shelves. Would you like something to drink? I asked, more out of habit than hospitality. They both declined. We sat in the living room, an awkward triangle of unspoken tensions. My mother spoke first. I had no idea, Sarah, about the money. All of it. Your father. He never told me how much you were helping. My father cleared his throat but didn't look at me. I thought I was protecting you, he said to my mother. I didn't want you to worry about the finances. And me? I asked quietly. What were you thinking about me? He finally met my eyes, his own clouded with something between shame and defensiveness. You were doing well. You could afford to help. I thought it was temporary. For 5 years? He looked away again. Things kept coming up. The roof, my back surgery, Jason's business idea. The last one made me sit up straighter. Jason's business idea? What are you talking about? My mother shot my father a warning look that came too late. The tutoring center, he admitted reluctantly. The money you gave Emily. Jason needed it for a different investment, but they thought you wouldn't approve. A cold clarity washed over me. Not just about the money that had been redirected, but about the larger pattern. I had never just been the daughter who wasn't present enough. I had been the family resource, financial and practical, while being kept in the dark about how my support was actually used. So, when you said I wasn't part of the family, I said to my father, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest, what did you actually mean? He looked down at his hands. I was angry. I didn't mean it. I think you did, I said without heat. I think you meant I wasn't fulfilling my role the way you wanted. And my role wasn't daughter or sister, it was provider. My mother started to object, but I held up my hand. I need you both to understand something. I gave that money freely. I never expected repayment, but I did expect basic respect. I expected to be valued for more than my bank account. And when Dad said what he said, it finally became clear that wasn't happening. My father's jaw tightened. So this is punishment then? Cutting us off financially because of one heated comment? I shook my head. No, this is a boundary. This is me recognizing an unhealthy pattern and choosing not to continue it. This is me finally accepting that no amount of financial support will ever make me an equal in this family. The silence that followed felt like its own kind of answer. What happens now? My mother asked eventually, her voice small. Now you figure out your finances honestly, together, I said. The mortgage payment is due on the 1st of each month. Property taxes are quarterly. I've prepared a folder with all the account information. I handed her a manila envelope similar to the one she'd sent me. Everything you need to take over is in there. And us? She asked. What about our relationship? I looked at both of them, my father still avoiding my gaze, my mother on the verge of tears. That depends on what kind of relationship you want going forward. One based on actual family bonds, or one based on what I can provide? Because I'm only interested in the first kind. They left an hour later with the folder and without any promises. I didn't expect immediate change. Patterns that deep don't transform overnight. 2 weeks passed before I heard from anyone in the family. Surprisingly, it was Jason who reached out first, asking to meet for coffee. He arrived looking uncomfortable, fidgeting with his cup for several minutes before speaking. I owe you an apology, he said finally. About the money, about the way we've treated you, all of it. I waited, watching his face as he struggled to continue. Dad finally told me everything. How much you've been helping all these years. How you bailed them out when he lost his job. I had no idea it was that extensive. Would it have changed anything if you had known? I asked. He considered this honestly. Maybe not at first. I've been resentful of your success, your freedom. It was easier to cast you as the absent daughter than to admit my own insecurities. His honesty surprised me. And now? Now, I see how we've all been playing assigned roles that aren't working for anyone. Dad's the provider who couldn't provide but couldn't admit it. Mom's the peacemaker who keeps secrets to maintain peace. I'm the good son who stays close but takes advantage. And you're the successful daughter we simultaneously rely on and resent. His assessment was so accurate it made me uncomfortable. So, what happens next? I don't know, he admitted, but I'm meeting with a financial advisor next week. Emily and I are figuring out our own budget without expecting help. And I told Dad he needs to apologize to you, really apologize, if he wants to maintain a relationship. We parted on better terms than we'd had in years, not fixed, but honest. A starting point. My father's apology came 3 weeks later, stilted and imperfect, but sincere enough that I could accept it. My mother's came in smaller ways, invitations without expectations, questions about my work that showed genuine interest, space to define our relationship on new terms. The mortgage payment came due again. They managed it themselves, though I know it required sacrifices and adjustments to their lifestyle. They sold the boat they rarely used. My father took a part-time consulting job despite his initial resistance. My mother started selling her handmade quilts online, something she'd always wanted to do but never pursued. As for me, I took the money I'd been sending them and opened a new account, part for my own future, part for genuine emergencies if they arose. Not automatic payments, but conscious choices I could make from a place of love rather than obligation. 6 months later, I bought a small house by the river, with a garden and a guest room that eventually, when the time was right, my parents actually used. Not as an entitlement, but as the gift it was meant to be. Some people might see what I did as walking away from family responsibility. I see it as creating the possibility for real family connection, the kind built on mutual respect rather than unspoken transactions. The kind where part of this family means being valued for who you are, not what you provide. So I ask you again, if it were your father, what would you have done? The morning after I canceled the payments, I woke to an unexpected stillness in my apartment. The usual weight I carried, that constant awareness of financial responsibility for my parents' home, had lifted, leaving something unfamiliar in its place. Freedom, maybe, or perhaps just clarity. I made coffee and stood by my kitchen window, watching the morning fog roll off the river. My phone had been silent since I'd left my parents' house, no missed calls, no text messages asking when I'd be coming back to finish dinner. Their silence spoke volumes, more confirmation that I'd been right to step away. As I got ready for work, selecting a crisp navy blazer and matching slacks, I realized I was standing straighter. My shoulders weren't hunched against the invisible burden I'd been carrying for years. I applied my makeup with careful precision, meeting my own eyes in the mirror without that flicker of resentment I usually suppressed. At the office, Deanna, my assistant, did a double take when I walked in. "You look different today," she said, handing me my schedule for the day. "Good different. Did something happen over the weekend?" I smiled. "Just made some long overdue changes." The day progressed with unusual efficiency. Client calls felt easier, decisions came more readily, and the constant mental calculations, how much I could spend on myself after covering my parents' expenses, had disappeared. I finished a proposal 2 days ahead of schedule and found myself volunteering for a project I would have normally declined due to time constraints. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Mom's asking if you're coming to Sunday dinner this week." Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, just business as usual, as if my father hadn't essentially disowned me 3 days earlier. I set my phone down without responding and turned back to my computer. The quarterly reports needed reviewing, and for once, I could focus entirely on the task at hand rather than the family drama simmering in the background of my mind. By 5 o'clock, I'd cleared my desk of pending work and was gathering my things when my office phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through the line. "Sarah, your brother is here to see you. Should I send him up?" I hesitated. "Did he say what it's about?" "Just that it's important and won't take long." I sighed. "Send him up." 5 minutes later, Jason appeared in my doorway, looking uncomfortable in the corporate environment. His construction company uniform, khaki pants and a polo with his company logo, stood out among the suits and dresses of my marketing firm. He'd never visited my office before, despite my having been here for nearly 4 years. "Nice view," he said, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. "Thanks," I replied, not offering more. "What brings you here, Jason?" He shifted his weight, looking around as if the answer might be written on the walls. "Dad asked me to come. There's some kind of problem with the bank. Something about payments bouncing." I leaned back in my chair. "Not a problem, a decision." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've been making your parents' mortgage payments for 5 years, and now I'm not." "That's ridiculous," he scoffed. "Dad wouldn't let you pay their mortgage." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder containing printed bank statements, sliding it across the desk to him. "See for yourself. Every month, $2,250 from my account to Riverside Mortgage Company. Account number matching Mom and Dad's loan. Starting May 2019, right after Dad lost his job at Westfield." Jason opened the folder reluctantly, his skepticism fading as he flipped through page after page of documented transfers. I could see the mental calculations happening behind his eyes. 60 months, over $135,000 just in mortgage payments. "There's more," I said, pulling out a second folder. "Property taxes, home insurance, The renovation last year when Dad's arthritis got worse, that was me, not their retirement fund. The emergency medical account for Mom's procedures, all of it. He looked up, confusion and disbelief warring on his face. Why would Dad lie about this? Pride, maybe, or control. Does it matter? What matters is, I've been supporting them financially while being treated like I don't contribute enough to the family. And I'm done. Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so similar to our father's that it momentarily softened my resolve. Look, I know Dad said some harsh things, but he was just upset about the anniversary party. You know how he gets. I do know how he gets. That's the problem. He gets to decide I'm not part of the family when I can't make an event, while simultaneously accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars from me without acknowledgement. That arrangement doesn't work for me anymore. Jason's expression hardened. So this is what revenge? Financial manipulation because your feelings got hurt? I shook my head. This is a boundary. This is me saying I won't finance my own exclusion anymore. Mom and Dad have options. They can downsize, adjust their budget, or you can step up if you're so concerned. I can't afford their mortgage. Neither could I, really, not while maintaining my own life and future. But I did it anyway for years because I thought that's what family meant. I was wrong. He stood up, agitation making his movements jerky. You know what this will do to them, right? They could lose the house. They won't lose the house if they're honest with themselves about their finances and make different choices. That's not on me anymore. He shook his head, disappointment radiating from him in waves. I never thought you'd be this cold. And I never thought I'd be treated like an ATM rather than a daughter. Looks like we're both learning new things about our family. After Jason left, I sat in my office as the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. His visit had been predictable. No recognition of the imbalance, just anger that I'd disrupted the comfortable arrangement that had benefited everyone but me. I thought about calling May, about venting my frustration over Jason's reaction, but decided against it. This was a journey I needed to navigate on my own terms, without seeking validation from others. I'd spent too many years trying to earn approval. I wouldn't fall back into that pattern now. Instead, I picked up my phone and sent a text to my mother. I won't be at Sunday dinner. Take care of yourself. No explanation, no justification. Just a statement of fact. It felt strange and liberating all at once. The next morning, I awoke to 3 missed calls from my mother and 1 from my father. I listened to the voicemails as I made breakfast. My mother's voice was tight with worry. Sarah, please call me back. Your father told me about the mortgage situation. We need to talk about this as a family. My father's message was briefer, his tone clipped. This is childish, Sarah. Call me back so we can sort this out. I deleted both messages without responding. They weren't ready for a real conversation yet. They were still in crisis management mode, trying to restore the status quo rather than addressing the fundamental imbalance that had led to this point. At work, I threw myself into preparations for the Chicago conference, the same one I'd be missing the anniversary party to attend. It was a significant opportunity, presenting our agency's innovative campaign strategies to industry leaders, potentially opening doors for national clients. The kind of career moment I'd worked toward for years, but had often downplayed around my family to avoid triggering my father's competitive nature or Jason's resentment. That afternoon, I received an email from the conference organizers asking if I'd be willing to join a panel discussion on digital marketing trends. I accepted immediately, allowing myself to feel genuine excitement about the professional recognition without the usual guilt that accompanied any personal success. By Friday, the situation with my family had escalated. Emily, Jason's wife, called while I was in a meeting. Her voicemail was both accusatory and pleading. Sarah, you need to fix this. Your parents are talking about putting the house on the market, and Jason is stressed about helping them move. This isn't fair to any of us. Any of us. The phrasing struck me as particularly revealing. In their minds, my decision affected all of us, except me, whose financial burden apparently didn't count in the family calculus. I was pondering this when my desk phone rang again. The receptionist sounded apologetic. "Sarah, your mother is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insisting on seeing you." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "I'll be down in a minute." In the lobby, my mother sat perched on the edge of a modern leather chair, looking out of place in her casual cardigan and slacks among the sleek, professional environment. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her hands clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. "Let's talk somewhere private," I said, guiding her to a small conference room off the main lobby. Once the door closed behind us, she wasted no time. "How could you do this without warning? Your father is beside himself. The bank called again this morning about the late payment." I sat across from her, keeping my voice even. "Mom, I've been paying your mortgage for 5 years. Did Dad tell you that part?" She looked away briefly. "He mentioned you helped sometimes when things were tight." "Sometimes? Mom, I've covered every payment since 2019, plus property taxes, plus home insurance, plus the renovations last year. Over $200,000 in total." Her eyes widened. "That can't be right." "It is right. And the problem isn't that I stopped. The problem is that for 5 years, Dad led you to believe you were financially stable when you weren't. You were dependent on me, a daughter who apparently isn't part of the family when she misses an anniversary party." My mother's face crumpled. "He didn't mean that, Sarah. You know how he gets when he's upset." "That's what Jason said too. But here's the thing. Why is it always my responsibility to understand how Dad gets, but never his responsibility to understand how his words and actions affect me?" She had no answer for that. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I continued, more gently. "But this arrangement wasn't working. It wasn't healthy for any of us. You and Dad need to face your financial reality and make decisions based on what you can actually afford, not what your adult daughter can subsidize while being treated as an outsider." "We could lose the house," she whispered. "You have options. You could downsize to something more affordable. Dad could take on part-time consulting work. He's been offered positions before. You could rent out the spare room. But whatever you decide, it needs to be your decision based on your resources." She wiped at her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "I didn't know, Sarah. About how much you were contributing. I swear I didn't." For the first time, I truly believed her. The realization brought a wave of sadness rather than vindication. My father hadn't just used me. He'd lied to my mother about their financial situation for years. "I believe you," I said. "And I'm sorry you're finding out this way. But I can't keep supporting a dynamic that's hurting all of us. Dad needs to be honest with you about your finances. Jason needs to stop expecting me to solve problems he's unwilling to help with. And I need to stop enabling patterns that devalue my place in this family." She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "What happens now?" "That depends on all of you. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. But I won't go back to being the family bank while being treated like an afterthought." After my mother left, I sat in the conference room alone, feeling drained but oddly peaceful. For the first time, I'd articulated boundaries without apologizing for them. I'd spoken my truth without softening it to protect others' feelings. The weekend passed quietly. I cleaned my apartment, went for a long run along the riverfront path, and met May for brunch on Sunday morning instead of attending family dinner. She listened as I recounted my conversation with my mother, nodding approvingly at the boundaries I'd established. "So, what will you do with all that extra money now?" she asked, stirring her mimosa. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the emotional aspects of the situation that I hadn't fully processed the financial implications. An extra $3,850 per month nearly $48,000 per year, that was now mine to direct as I chose. I don't know, I admitted. Save for a house maybe? Travel more? Start that side business I've been talking about for years? All of the above, May said, raising her glass in a toast, to funding your own dreams for a change. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. An email from my father, brief and to the point. We need to talk. Dinner at Lorenzo's Tuesday, 7 p.m. Just you and me. Lorenzo's was where we'd celebrated. My college graduation, my first promotion, his retirement. A neutral ground with good memories. It was a peace offering of sorts, though not an apology. I replied with equal brevity, I'll be there. Tuesday evening found me arriving at Lorenzo's 5 minutes early, as was my habit. The restaurant hadn't changed much over the years. White tablecloths, soft lighting, the same faded murals of Italian countryside scenes on the walls. My father was already seated at a corner table, a glass of red wine in front of him. He stood when he saw me, an automatic gesture of politeness that felt at odds with our last interaction. I noticed he'd worn a proper button-down shirt rather than his usual casual attire, another small signal that this meeting mattered to him. You look well, he said as I sat down. Thank you. How are you and Mom? He avoided the question, gesturing to the waiter instead. After I'd ordered a glass of wine and we'd both requested our usual meals, fettuccine for him, mushroom ravioli for me, the uncomfortable silence returned. Finally, he cleared his throat. Your mother told me about your conversation. I waited, not offering any response that might make this easier for him. I should have been more transparent about the financial arrangements, he continued, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth rather than meeting mine. With your mother, and with you. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd expected. Why weren't you? I asked. Why hide how much I was contributing? He shifted in his seat, discomfort evident in the tightness around his mouth. I was supposed to be the provider. That was my role. To take care of the family, to make sure we were secure. When I lost my job, when the medical bills started piling up, it felt like failure. So you let me take over the financial burden without acknowledgement because it protected your pride? He flinched slightly at the directness of my question. It wasn't that calculated. At first, it was just going to be temporary. A few months until I found another position. Then it became 6 months, then a year. It got harder to explain the truth the longer it went on. Our food arrived, creating a brief reprieve from the conversation. I took a few bites, more to have something to do with my hands than from actual hunger. Sarah, my father said after several minutes of silent eating, I said things I shouldn't have. About you not being part of the family. I was angry and embarrassed, and I lashed out. That's the problem, Dad. When you're angry, you say what you truly think. And on some level, you meant it. You've always seen my career as a choice against family rather than a different kind of contribution. He started to object, then stopped himself, considering my words. Maybe there's some truth to that, he admitted finally. I come from a different generation. Family meant physical presence, traditional roles. Your mother and I, we were always there for everything, every game, every school event for you and Jason. And I appreciate that. But presence isn't the only way to contribute to a family. I've been financially supporting your household for years. Isn't that a form of being present? Of prioritizing family? He nodded slowly. I never looked at it that way. To me, the money was separate somehow. It wasn't separate to me. It was sacrifice. It was love expressed in the form of financial security for you and Mom. But that was never recognized or valued. It was just expected. Our conversation was interrupted by the waiter asking if we wanted dessert. We both declined, suddenly eager to continue this long overdue dialogue without distractions. Your mother and I have been talking, my father said once we were alone. Again. About our options going forward, without your contributions. And? We're going to sell the house. It's too big for just the two of us anyway, especially with my mobility issues. We found a nice single-level condo closer to Jason's place that fits our actual budget. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that they were being realistic, sadness at the loss of the family home, pride in their practical decision. That sounds sensible, I said. How are you feeling about it? He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Scared, embarrassed, relieved in a way. It's been exhausting, maintaining the illusion that everything was fine financially when it wasn't. I can imagine. Jason's not happy about it, he added. He thinks I should ask you to reconsider, at least until after their anniversary party. He doesn't want the family transition to overshadow their celebration. Of course he doesn't, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I asked, "And what do you think?" My father met my eyes directly for the first time that evening. I think, we need to stand on our own feet. It's not your responsibility to maintain our lifestyle, especially not when we've failed to appreciate what you've been doing all these years. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine recognition, a first step. I'd like us to find a new way forward, I said. One where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide. Where my career isn't seen as a betrayal of family, but as a different kind of contribution. I'd like that too, he said quietly. It might take time for me to unlearn some old patterns, but I'm willing to try if you are. As we walked out of the restaurant, my father hesitated, then awkwardly reached out for a hug. I stepped into his embrace, noting how much frailer he felt than I remembered. We were both changing, both vulnerable in our own ways. The anniversary party, he said, as we parted. It's important to Jason, but I understand now why you can't be there. Your conference is important too. Thank you for seeing that, I said, genuinely touched by this small acknowledgement. Maybe we could have a separate celebration when you get back? For Jason and Emily? But also to mark this new understanding between us. I smiled. I'd like that. Driving home that night, I felt a cautious optimism taking root. Not everything was resolved. Real change would require consistent effort from all of us. But for the first time, I saw the possibility of a family, relationship based on mutual respect rather than one-sided expectations. The following week brought practical developments. My parents listed their house and accepted an offer within days. The market was strong and their location desirable. They found a single-level condo that required minimal down payment, leaving them with enough from the house sale to establish a proper emergency fund. My mother called to share the details, her voice lighter than I'd heard in years. It's actually a relief, she confessed. The big house was becoming too much to maintain anyway, and being on one level will be so much better for your father's knees. The Chicago conference arrived, overlapping with Jason and Emily's anniversary party as expected. I delivered my keynote presentation to an engaged audience, participated in the panel discussion where my insights were genuinely valued, and made connections with potential clients who appreciated my expertise. On the evening of the anniversary party, I sent Jason and Emily a text. Congratulations on 10 years. Looking forward to celebrating with you when I return. Sending love from Chicago. Jason's response came hours later, shorter but sincere. Thanks. We'll talk when you're back. 2 weeks after returning from Chicago, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. My parents, Jason and Emily, May, and a few close friends. We celebrated Jason and Emily's anniversary with champagne and stories, but we also celebrated something less definable, a family in transition, learning to relate to each other with greater honesty and respect. As everyone mingled in my living room, my father approached me by the window, away from the others. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, his voice low enough that only I could hear. About different ways of being present, different forms of contribution. I nodded, waiting. I was wrong to suggest you weren't part of this family. The truth is, you've held us together in ways I was too proud to acknowledge. I'm sorry, Sarah. Truly sorry. The apology I'd been waiting for, delivered simply and directly. No qualifications, no excuses. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. He gestured toward the gathering, my mother laughing with May, Jason helping Emily with her plate, friends who had become extended family over the years. This is nice. Different, but nice. It is, I agreed. A new chapter for all of us. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I found a small envelope tucked under my fruit bowl. Inside was a check from my father for $5,000, a fraction of what I'd contributed over the years, and a note. This doesn't begin to repay what we owe you, but it's a start. More importantly, we're opening a separate account to rebuild our own safety net. No more dependence, no more secrets. Thank you for the wake-up call we needed. Love, Dad. I set the check and note aside, feeling an unexpected lightness. The money wasn't the point. It never had been. The acknowledgement, the shift in perspective, the commitment to change. That was what mattered. 6 months later, I used some of the money I'd been sending my parents to make a down payment on a small house with a garden. Not because I needed to prove anything to anyone, but because it was what I wanted for myself. My parents helped me move in, bringing plants for the garden and cooking our first meal in the new kitchen. It wasn't perfect. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring gentle but firm reminders of our new boundaries. Jason still struggled sometimes with the shifts in family dynamics, though he was making efforts to understand my perspective. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer the family ATM, silently funding others' lives while being criticized for my choices. I was Sarah, daughter, sister, friend, professional, valued for who I was rather than what I provided. Some might see what I did as harsh, as walking away when family needed me. I see it as the necessary disruption that allowed us all to build something healthier. Something real. Financial support given without recognition isn't generosity, it's exploitation. And family bonds maintained through obligation rather than mutual respect aren't really bonds at all. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop playing a role that diminishes you, even when it's a role you've played so long that everyone, including yourself, has forgotten it isn't who you really are. 1 year after I stopped the payments, I stood in my garden, dirt under my fingernails, planting the tomato seedlings my mother had given me from her new community plot. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I'd been funding their lifestyle. Now we were exchanging homegrown vegetables as equals. The spring sunshine warmed my back as I tamped the soil around the delicate plants, listening to the neighborhood sounds, children playing, someone mowing a lawn, birds calling from the maple tree that shaded my yard. The last 12 months had transformed everything. My parents had settled into their condo, adapting to a simpler lifestyle with surprising grace. My father had taken on consulting work 3 days a week, which kept him engaged and contributed to their actual financial stability. My mother had joined a quilting group that sold their creations at local markets, bringing in modest but meaningful income that was entirely hers. Their new place was smaller, but somehow felt more like a home than the large house ever had, perhaps because it was truly theirs, built on honesty rather than hidden subsidies. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from May. Don't forget, dinner at 7. Dave's making his famous lasagna. I smiled, brushing soil from my hands. Dave was May's new boyfriend, an elementary school music teacher with a passion for Italian cooking. Their relationship was only 4 months old, but I'd never seen my friend happier. I texted back a quick confirmation and turned to the next seedling. As I worked, I reflected on how my own daily rhythms had changed. The constant background anxiety about my parents' finances had disappeared, replaced by a sense of agency over my own future. I'd opened a dedicated investment account with the money that used to go toward their expenses, already accumulating a healthy balance. I'd started taking a watercolor class on Wednesday evenings, something I'd wanted to do for years but had always dismissed as an unnecessary luxury. Most significantly, I'd accepted a position as partner at my firm, a promotion that came with more responsibility but also more creative control. The ringing of my doorbell interrupted my gardening meditation. I wasn't expecting anyone, but Saturday afternoon visitors weren't unusual in this friendly neighborhood. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked around the side of the house. Jason stood on my front porch, holding a cardboard box. Our relationship had been the slowest to heal after everything that happened. While my parents had gradually accepted the new reality and worked to rebuild our connection, Jason had maintained a stubborn distance, as if my boundary setting had been a personal affront to him specifically. Our interactions at family gatherings were polite but strained, lacking the easy camaraderie we'd had as children. "Hey," he said, looking vaguely uncomfortable. "I was in the area. Thought I'd drop this off." He held out the box. "Come in," I offered, opening the door wider. He hesitated briefly before stepping inside. My living room was bright with afternoon light streaming through the large windows. Books lined the built-in shelves, and a half-finished watercolor sat on a small easel in the corner. I decorated the space with items that reflected my tastes rather than what I thought others might expect. Colorful throw pillows, photographs from my travels, pottery from local artists. "Nice place," Jason said, setting the box on my coffee table. "I haven't been here since the housewarming." "Thanks. What's in the box?" He seemed relieved to have something specific to focus on. Mom was going through stuff before their trip to Tucson next month. Found some old family photos she thought you might want. He opened the lid, revealing neatly stacked photo albums and loose photographs. I picked up the top album, my high school graduation. I flipped it open to find myself in cap and gown, flanked by beaming parents. The expected shots, but also candid moments. Laughing with friends, hugging my favorite teacher, Jason giving me bunny ears in the background. "She organized them chronologically," Jason added. "Typical mom." I nodded, turning pages. "The trip to Tucson? That's to visit Aunt Carol?" "Yeah, 2 weeks. They're driving, making a road trip out of it. Dad's even talking about some bird watching at those national parks along the way." I smiled at the image, my father with binoculars, my mother with her ever-present notebook, recording species names and locations. Their world had gotten smaller in terms of material possessions, but seemed to be expanding in experiences. "That sounds like them," I said. "Want some coffee? Or I have beer in the fridge." Jason glanced at his watch. "Actually, coffee would be good. I have some time." This was new. Him making time to stay rather than dropping things off and immediately finding a reason to leave. I led him to the kitchen, where the afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the blue tile backsplash I'd installed myself. As I prepared the coffee, he wandered around the space, stopping to examine the row of herbs growing in pots along the windowsill. "Emily's into gardening now, too," he commented. "She's converted half our backyard into vegetable beds." "How is Emily and the kids?" As the coffee brewed, Jason's stiff posture gradually relaxed. He told me about his son's Little League team, his daughter's obsession with marine biology, Emily's expanding tutoring business, normal conversation, the kind we hadn't managed in months. When I handed him a mug, he took it with a nod of thanks and then asked, "Remember when we used to climb that big oak tree in the backyard? The one Dad was always threatening to cut down, because it dropped acorns all over his car?" I laughed, surprised by the sudden reminiscence. "You built that rickety platform in the top branches. Mom was convinced we'd break our necks." "But we never did," he said, smiling into his coffee. "We were careful, even when we were being reckless." We carried our drinks to the living room. sitting across from each other with the box of photos between us. Jason pulled out another album, Family Vacations, and began flipping through it. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said without looking up. "That day when you canceled the payments, did you know what would happen? Did you plan it all out?" I considered his question, sensing its importance. I knew it would force changes. I didn't know exactly what form those changes would take. I just knew I couldn't continue as things were. He nodded slowly. "I was angry for a long time. At you, for pulling the financial rug out. At Dad, for hiding how dependent they were on you. At myself, for never noticing what was happening." "It wasn't your responsibility to notice," I said. "Dad worked hard to keep it hidden. Still." He closed the album, finally meeting my eyes. I should have seen it. "All those years, you never took vacations, never bought a house, always had these limits on what you'd spend on yourself. Meanwhile, I was asking you for money for Emily's business, for down payments. All while Dad was telling me how you were too career-focused, too selfish to be properly family-oriented. This was more insight than I'd expected from my brother, more self-awareness. The thing is," he continued, "I believed him. It was easier to see you as the selfish one than to question why Dad always had these stories about family loyalty. That somehow ended with you giving and us taking." I sat with this acknowledgement, letting it settle between us. Why the change of perspective? What's different now? Jason's expression grew more serious. "Emily's brother got into some financial trouble last winter. He asked us for help, just temporarily," he said. "We gave him what we could. Then he asked, again. And again. Each time with a good reason, each time just until he got back on his feet." I nodded, seeing where this was headed. After the third time, Emily sat me down and said we needed to set boundaries. That helping wasn't really helping if it created dependency. That sometimes the kindest thing isn't the easiest thing. He gave me a rueful smile. "Sound familiar?" "She's smart, your wife." "Yeah, she is. And she made me see what you did differently. Not as abandonment, but as necessary correction." He paused. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for not understanding, for making it harder than it needed to be." The apology hung in the air between us, simple but profound. Not dramatic, not accompanied by tears or grand gestures, but real. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." We spent the next hour going through photos, reminiscing about childhood adventures, laughing at forgotten fashion choices, remembering grandparents and neighbors and pets long gone. It wasn't a complete healing. Too much had happened for that. But it was a beginning, a tentative bridge across the divide that had grown between us. As Jason prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Mom and Dad's anniversary is next month. 40 years. Emily and I are hosting a small dinner at our place. Nothing fancy, just family. Will you come?" "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. After he left, I returned to my garden, finishing the planting with a lighter heart. The tomato seedlings looked vulnerable but determined, reaching toward the sun despite their fragile stems. I watered them gently, knowing they would strengthen with time and proper care. Later that evening at May and Dave's apartment, surrounded by the rich aroma of garlic and tomatoes, I recounted Jason's visit. "Sounds like real progress," May said, pouring more wine into my glass. "Not just the surface politeness you've been dealing with." "It feels different," I agreed. "More genuine." Dave, who knew my story through May, nodded thoughtfully. "Family systems take time to recalibrate. You disrupted a long-established pattern. That's never comfortable, but sometimes it's necessary." As a middle child from a large family, Dave had his own experiences with complex family dynamics. His perspective often provided useful insights, free from the emotional entanglements that clouded my own judgment. The anniversary dinner will Be interesting, I said. First time we'll all be together at Jason's house. Are you nervous? May asked. I considered the question. Not nervous exactly. Just aware that we're creating a new normal. New patterns, that takes intention. The conversation shifted to other topics. May's upcoming work trip to Singapore, Dave's school music program, a mutual friend's recent engagement. Normal life continuing around and through the ongoing family recalibration. This was something I'd learned over the past year, that healing family relationships didn't have to consume all my emotional energy. There was room for friendships, career growth, personal interests, new connections. The week before my parents' anniversary, I received an unexpected email from my father. He'd never been one for digital communication, preferring phone calls, or face-to-face conversation, so seeing his name in my inbox was unusual enough to make me pause. The subject line read simply, "Thank you. Sarah. I've been thinking about what to give your mother for our anniversary. 40 years is a long time, and traditional gifts seem inadequate. I decided the best gift I could offer her is honesty, something I should have given her, and you, long ago. I've written down our complete financial history, including the years when you were supporting us without her knowledge. I've shown her exactly how things stand now, with our actual income and expenses clearly documented. No more secrets, no more pretending." She cried when she read it, not because of the content, but because of what it represented. A new kind of partnership based on truth rather than appearances. This change, this shift toward honesty, began with you. With your courage in stepping back when stepping back was necessary. It would have been easier for you to continue as things were, resentment building but life superficially peaceful. Instead, you chose the harder path of truth. I wasn't ready to appreciate that choice when you made it. I am now. With love and gratitude. Dad. I read the email twice, then once more, absorbing its significance. It wasn't dramatic or overly emotional, that wasn't my father's style. But in its straightforward acknowledgement lay a profound shift. Not just in our relationship, but in how he saw himself, his marriage, his responsibilities. I composed a reply, equally straightforward. Dad, thank you for sharing this. Mom deserves that honesty, and I'm glad you found a way to offer it. 40 years is worth celebrating, especially as you begin this new chapter together. I'm looking forward to the dinner at Jason's. It feels right, somehow, to mark this anniversary with all of us present, each in our own way participating in this family recalibration. See you Saturday. Love. Sarah. The day of the anniversary dinner arrived bright and clear. I spent the morning at a local farmer's market, selecting ingredients for the salad I'd offered to bring. Heirloom tomatoes, fresh basil, local mozzarella. Simple but thoughtful, like the relationship we were all working to build. As I prepared the dish in my kitchen, I reflected on the past year's journey. The initial shock and anger had faded, replaced by something quieter, but more durable. Not perfect understanding that would likely always remain elusive, but a mutual respect that acknowledged our differences while honoring our connection. I arrived at Jason and Emily's suburban home at exactly 6 o'clock, balancing the salad in one hand and a gift bag containing a bottle of champagne in the other. Emily answered the door, her welcoming smile warmer than it had been in previous encounters. "Sarah, come in. Everyone's on the back deck. It's too nice to stay indoors." I followed her through the house, noting small changes since my last visit. New photographs on the wall, a different arrangement of furniture, children's artwork, proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Signs of a home in constant evolution, adapting to its inhabitants' changing needs and interests. On the deck, my parents sat in cushioned chairs, looking relaxed and engaged in conversation with Jason's children. My father was showing my nephew how to use a small pocket knife to carve a piece of wood, something he'd done with Jason and me when we were young. My mother was examining a seashell collection my niece had arranged on a small table, asking thoughtful questions about where each specimen had been found. They looked up as I stepped outside, their smiles genuine. My mother rose to embrace me, the familiar scent of her perfume bringing a rush of childhood memories. "You look wonderful," she said, holding me at arm's length to examine me more fully. "There's something different about you lately." "Just happy," I replied, realizing as I said it that it was true. Despite the complications, despite the ongoing work of rebuilding family connections, I was fundamentally happier than I'd been a year ago. More authentic, more at peace. My father approached more cautiously, our new relationship still finding its footing. "The garden doing well?" he asked, his way of acknowledging my new home, my independent life. "The tomatoes you gave me are thriving," I told him. "And the herbs are taking over the kitchen windowsill." He nodded, pleased. Good soil in that neighborhood, always known for growing things well. It was his version of approval, practical, grounded in tangible realities rather than emotional expressions. I accepted it as intended. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Emily had prepared my father's favorite pot roast, using my mother's recipe but adding her own touches. We ate at the large table on the deck, surrounded by string lights that brightened as the sun began to set. The conversation flowed naturally: work updates, neighborhood news, stories about the children's latest adventures. No one mentioned finances, mortgages, or past conflicts. Not because they were forbidden topics, but because they no longer dominated our interactions. They had become just one aspect of our shared history, neither ignored nor overemphasized. After dinner, as Emily served coffee and the berry crumble I knew she'd made especially because it was my favorite, Jason raised his glass for a toast. To Mom and Dad, 40 years together. Through better and worse, richer and poorer. He glanced at me with a small smile, acknowledging the ironies embedded in those traditional vows. "You've shown us what commitment looks like. Not perfect, but persistent. We love you both." We all raised our glasses. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and my father reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'd like to add something," I said, surprising myself with the impulse to speak. "To new beginnings within long journeys, to honesty that comes late but still arrives, and to family, not as an obligation, but as a choice we make again and again." My father's eyes met mine across the table, understanding passing between us without words. My mother nodded, a slight smile playing at her lips. Jason and Emily exchanged a glance, then raised their glasses higher. "To family," they echoed. Later, as the evening wound down and the children were sent to bed with affectionate reminders about school the next day, I found myself alone with my mother in the kitchen, helping to load the dishwasher. "Your father showed me his email to you," she said quietly, rinsing a plate before handing it to me. "And your response." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I want you to know that I understand now," she continued. "Not just what you did for us, financially, but why you finally stopped. It must have been so lonely carrying that burden without acknowledgement." Her insight caught me off guard. My mother had always been perceptive, but in the complex family dynamics dominated by my father's personality, her quieter observations often went unvoiced. "It was," I admitted. "But I'm not sure I understood it myself until I stepped away. How the financial imbalance was connected to the emotional imbalance. How being the family ATM and being undervalued were two sides of the same coin." She dried her hands on a dish towel, turning to face me fully. "I've been thinking about patterns. How they get established over time, almost without our noticing. How they can seem normal until someone disrupts them. Like when Dad lost his job," I suggested. That disrupted the established pattern. Yes, but then we created a new pattern. One that relied on you in ways that weren't sustainable or fair. And we might have continued indefinitely if you hadn't had the courage to step away. Her understanding was deeper than I'd realized, her perspective clearer than I'd given her credit for. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "As a mother, I should have protected you from taking on that role." Instead, I accepted the story your father constructed, that we were managing fine, that your contributions were supplemental rather than essential. "You didn't know," I reminded her. "Dad kept the details from you." But I could have asked more questions, could have looked more closely at our actual finances instead of accepting the comfortable fiction. She sighed. It's easy to believe what we want to believe, especially when the truth would require difficult changes. Her self-awareness struck me. This quiet strength that had always been present, but often overshadowed by my father's more dominant personality. "We're making those changes now," I said. "All of us." She smiled, a genuine expression that softened. The lines around her eyes. "Yes, we are. Better late than never, as they say." As we finished in the kitchen and rejoined the others on the deck, now illuminated only by the string lights and the rising moon, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The family constellation had shifted, roles had been redefined, expectations realigned. What remained was the core connection, stronger now for having been tested, more authentic for having faced difficult truths. My father caught my eye as I sat down, raising his coffee cup in a small private toast. I raised mine in return, acknowledging the distance we'd traveled and the journey still ahead. The drive home that night was peaceful, the spring air cool through my open car windows. I thought about the email I'd send in the morning to a real estate agent I'd been researching, the first step toward purchasing a small rental property with some of the money I'd been setting aside, an investment in my own future, a new kind of security built on self-reliance rather than familial obligation. I thought too about the watercolor class I'd signed up for, intermediate level now, advancing from the beginner course I'd started months ago. The instructor had praised my latest work, suggesting I consider submitting pieces to a small local gallery. A different kind of investment, this one in creativity and personal expression. Both represented new directions, choices made freely, rather than in reaction to others' needs or expectations. This was perhaps the most significant change of the past year. Not just the external shifts in family dynamics or financial arrangements, but the internal reorientation toward my own priorities, my own path. As I turned onto my street, I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watering her elaborate front garden despite the late hour. She waved as I parked, her familiar gesture welcoming in its regularity. We'd developed a friendly relationship over recent months, exchanging gardening tips and occasional meals. Another expansion in my world. Another connection formed on equal, healthy terms. Inside my house, I moved through my evening routine with a sense of contentment. This space was truly mine. Not just legally and financially, but emotionally. Every decision, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of furniture, reflected my preferences, my aesthetic, my comfort. I paused at the window overlooking the backyard, where my small garden was visible in the moonlight. The tomato plants from my mother were just one section. Around them grew herbs, flowers, vegetables, a diverse ecosystem I'd created and nurtured. Some plants thrived in full sun, others preferred shade. Some needed frequent watering, others thrived on neglect. Each had its place, its purpose, its particular needs. Family was like that too, I reflected. Each member with their own nature, their own requirements for growth. The art was in creating conditions where everyone could flourish without diminishing others. It had taken disruption, painful but necessary, to begin establishing that balance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, the ongoing work of maintaining healthy boundaries while nurturing meaningful connections. But tonight, standing in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by evidence of my independent life, I felt ready for whatever came next. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't, and perhaps never would be completely, but because I'd found my center, my voice, my worth, not defined by what I gave or what I withheld, but by who I was. Some might still question my decision to withdraw financial support when my father's hurtful words crossed a line I could no longer ignore. They might see it as an overreaction, a moment of anger given too much power to alter family relationships. But I know differently. I understand now that it wasn't about the money, or even about the specific words spoken in a moment of frustration. It was about recognizing a fundamental imbalance that had grown so familiar we'd all stopped seeing it, about having the courage to step away from a role that diminished me, even when that role came with the comfort of familiar patterns and the approval that compliance always brings. True family isn't maintained through financial dependence or obligation. It's built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the freedom to be fully yourself while remaining connected. Sometimes finding that balance requires disruption, requires someone brave enough to say, "This isn't working," not for any of us. A year ago, I became that someone. Not out of malice or revenge, but out of love. For myself, and ultimately, for my family too. The journey hasn't been easy, but as I stand here in the home I've created, looking out at the garden I've planted, I know without doubt that it was necessary and worth every difficult step. 5 years had passed since that pivotal moment in my parents' living room. 5 years since I'd driven home in stunned silence and canceled the automatic payments that had silently drained my future to maintain their illusions. 5 years of rebuilding, redefining, and reconnecting on entirely new terms. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my home office as I reviewed the quarterly statements from my property management company. The 3 rental units I'd purchased had performed well, providing steady income while appreciating in value. A small empire built from the foundations of self-respect and boundaries, brick by brick, choice by choice. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder, lunch with Dad, Riverfront Cafe, 12:30. I smiled at the notification, still sometimes surprised by how ordinary such meetings had become. Once tense encounters filled with unspoken resentments had evolved into genuine connections, imperfect but authentic. I finished my work, closed my laptop, and changed into a casual sundress appropriate for both the summer heat and the riverside restaurant my father preferred. The drive downtown was pleasant, the familiar streets a reminder of how much this city had become truly home in a way it hadn't been when I was merely passing through on my way to and from family obligations. My father was already seated at an outdoor table when I arrived, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his posture more relaxed than I remembered from childhood. He stood as I approached, greeting me with a brief hug, another evolution from the formal nods of the past. "You look well," he said, a standard opening that had once been perfunctory, but now carried genuine attention. "The gallery show must be agreeing with you." I smiled, taking the seat across from him. My watercolor hobby had blossomed over the years, eventually leading to a small but successful exhibition at a local gallery. The opening had been last week, attended by the entire family, a gathering that would have been unimaginable 5 years ago. It was terrifying and wonderful, I admitted. "I still can't believe people actually bought my paintings." He nodded, a hint of pride visible beneath his usual reserve. "Your mother has the one of the river valley hanging in their living room, shows it off to everyone who visits." The waiter arrived to take our orders, iced tea and a salmon salad. For me, coffee and the daily special for my father. As he walked away, my father reached into the messenger bag beside his chair and pulled out a manila envelope. "I wanted to show you something," he said, sliding it across the table. "Been working on this for a while now." I opened the envelope curiously. Inside was a bound document titled Financial Legacy Planning, a Guide for Our Family. I flipped through the pages, recognizing my father's methodical approach in the carefully structured sections covering retirement accounts, insurance policies, property details, and investment holdings. "It's a complete record of your mother's and my finances," he explained. "Current status, historical context, future projections. Everything transparent, everything accounted for." I continued scanning the document, noting the detailed instructions for accessing accounts, contact information for financial advisors, and clear explanations of decision-making processes. "This is incredible," I said, genuinely impressed by the thoroughness. "What prompted it?" He took a sip of water before answering. "Remember when I showed your mother our true financial situation for our anniversary a few years back? That was the beginning. But I realized it wasn't enough to just be honest about the past. We needed clarity about the future, too." He tapped the document with one finger. "I've made copies for you and Jason. Everything's there. The good decisions and the mistakes, the assets and the liabilities. No more secrets, no more pretending." The significance of this gesture wasn't lost on me. My father, who had once hidden financial struggles behind a facade of stability, who had redirected my support without acknowledgement, was now creating a legacy of transparency. "This must have taken months," I said. "Almost a year," he admitted. "Had to go through a lot of old records, make some difficult assessments. Your mother helped. She's surprisingly good with spreadsheets." He smiled slightly, another shift from the days when he'd handled all financial matters alone, keeping her in the dark under the guise of protection. Our food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As we began eating, I considered how this document represented more than just financial planning. It was a tangible symbol of my father's transformation. Not dramatic or complete, but substantial and ongoing. "There's something else I wanted to discuss," he said after we'd eaten in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Jason mentioned you're considering expanding your property investments." I nodded, curious about where this was heading. "I'm looking at a small commercial space downtown. The numbers look promising, but it's a bigger commitment than my residential properties." My father set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "I'd like to offer some advice if you're open to it. Not as a father telling his daughter what to do, but as someone with experience in commercial real estate." The careful framing wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, he would have simply instructed, expecting compliance. Now he was offering, acknowledging my autonomy. "I'd appreciate that," I said, meaning it. We spent the next half hour discussing CAP, rates, tenant considerations, and maintenance contingencies. His insights were valuable, drawn from decades in the business world. I took notes on my phone, asking questions and sometimes challenging his assessments. An exchange between equals rather than the one-sided directives of the past. When the check arrived, I reached for it automatically. He made no move to stop. Me, another small but significant shift. In the old dynamic, he would have insisted on paying regardless of circumstances, maintaining the appearance of the provider even when the reality was quite different. "I've been thinking about what you said last month," he said as we waited for the card to be processed, "about finding meaning in this phase of life." At our previous lunch, we'd discussed his adjustment to semi-retirement, the challenges of redefining purpose after decades of career-centered identity. "Have you explored any of those volunteer opportunities?" I asked. He nodded. "Started mentoring at the community college, business students mostly. Once a week, just a few hours. But it's..." He searched for the right word. gratifying, using what I know to help them avoid some pitfalls. I smiled, easily imagining my father in this role, stern but knowledgeable, demanding but ultimately supportive. That sounds perfect for you. Your mother thinks so too. Says it keeps me from micromanaging her quilting business. He chuckled, the sound still somewhat unfamiliar but increasingly frequent in recent years. As we walked to our cars, the summer heat intensifying, my father paused in the parking lot. I'm proud of you, Sarah, not just for the success, the career, the properties, the art, for the strength it took to reset our family dynamic when it needed resetting. The words hung in the air between us, simple but profound. Pride from my father had once been doled out in small measures, contingent on achievements he valued. This was different. Recognition of character rather than accomplishments, acknowledgement of the difficult path rather than just its outcomes. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. He nodded once, a man still more comfortable with action than emotion, then got into his car with a brief wave. I stood watching as he drove, away, feeling the complex mixture of love, respect, and lingering wariness that characterized our healed but still human relationship. That evening, I met May for our weekly dinner tradition. 5 years had brought changes to her life too. Marriage to Dave, a promotion to senior management at her firm, and most recently, the adoption of their first child, a 2-year-old boy, named Leo, who had quickly become the center of their world. Tonight was adults only, though, with Leo staying with Dave's parents. We sat at our favorite table at Trellis, the upscale neighborhood bistro that had become our regular spot, ordering wine and catching up on the week's events. So, how was lunch with your dad? May asked, always direct. She'd witnessed the entire journey of my family transformation, offering unwavering support through the difficult early days and genuine celebration of each step toward healthier relationships. Good, I said, then elaborated about the financial legacy document and his mentoring work. It's strange sometimes seeing him evolve like this. Makes me wonder what kind of father he might have been if he'd faced his financial insecurities decades ago. May nodded, understanding the complex emotions beneath my observation. People change when they're ready to change. Sometimes that takes a crisis, like you cutting off the financial support. Sometimes it takes years of small realizations building up. Or both, I added, thinking of the gradual shifts I'd observed in my father over the past 5 years. Not a dramatic transformation, but a series of small adjustments, each building on the last. Jason called yesterday, I continued, swirling the wine in my glass. Asked if I'd consider going in with him on an investment property, a duplex near the University District. May's eyebrows rose. That's a change. Is it a good deal? I shrugged. Potentially. The numbers look solid, and student housing is always in demand. But it's more about what it represents. 5 years ago, Jason saw me as the family ATM or the selfish career woman, depending on what narrative was convenient. Now he's approaching me as a potential business partner, an equal. Are you going to do it? I'd been considering this question since Jason's call. I think so. With clear parameters and formal agreements in place, not as a family favor, but as a legitimate business arrangement that benefits us both. May smiled approvingly. Boundaries intact, but open to new possibilities. That's growth, for both of you. Our conversation shifted to other topics. May's upcoming work presentation, my tentative plans for a solo trip to Portugal in the fall, mutual friends' recent engagements and career moves. The easy flow between serious matters and everyday updates was another form of freedom I'd gained over the years. The ability to hold space for family complexities without letting them dominate my entire existence. After dinner, we walked through the neighborhood, enjoying the lingering summer twilight. We passed the community center, where I taught a weekly watercolor class for seniors. The bakery where I had become friendly with the owner during my daily coffee stops, the small bookstore that hosted the monthly reading group I'd joined last year. Each place a thread in the tapestry of my life beyond family roles and obligations. "Have you heard from Michael recently?" May asked as we turned onto the street leading back to our cars. Michael was the landscape architect I'd been dating for nearly a year, a thoughtful, steady relationship that had developed naturally from a chance meeting at a community garden event. Neither of us was rushing toward major commitments, but the connection had deepened gradually into something significant. "He's in Seattle until Thursday for that sustainable design conference," I replied, sending me photos of every interesting tree he encounters. May laughed. "Perfect match. You send him pictures of interesting cloud formations to paint, he sends you trees." It was true. Our shared appreciation for natural beauty had been one of the first connections between us. But there was more to it than that. Michael brought a calm steadiness to my life, respecting my independence while offering genuine partnership. He had his own established career, his own home, his own full life. No need to be financially supported, no tendency to disappear when things got challenging. My phone chimed with a text as if conjured by our conversation. Michael, sending a photo of an unusual Japanese maple with the caption, "Reminded me of your painting from last month. Dinner Saturday?" I showed May the message, smiling at the simple thoughtfulness it represented. "You're happy," she observed, not a question, but a confirmation. "I am," I agreed, realizing the truth of it. Not the fragile happiness that comes from momentary pleasures or external validation, but the deeper contentment built on self-respect, meaningful connections, and choices aligned with my values. The next morning, I met with my real estate agent to review the commercial property I was considering. The space had potential, good location, solid structure, versatile configuration, but also required significant upfront investment. 5 years ago, such a commitment would have been impossible. My financial resources constantly diverted to my parents' needs. Now it represented an exciting possibility, a step toward building long-term security on my own terms. As we walked through the empty storefront, discussing renovation estimates and potential rental arrangements, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Looked at those duplex numbers again. Still interested in discussing? Could meet this weekend." I responded with a suggested time on Sunday afternoon, then refocused on the property inspection. This balance, family connections integrated into my life rather than dominating it, still felt like a victory, small but significant. That evening, I called my mother, our weekly check-in another established rhythm of our reconstructed relationship. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm. "I was just thinking about you," she said. "Your father showed me the commercial property listing you sent him. It looks promising." We chatted about the property for a few minutes before she shifted to updates about her quilting group, now a thriving small business with pieces selling at local markets and through an online shop that my nephew had helped her establish. The pride in her voice when discussing her creations was relatively new. A woman discovering her own capabilities after decades defined primarily by supporting others. "Oh, and I wanted to ask," she continued, "would you be available for dinner? Next Thursday? Emily's parents will be in town, and we thought it would be nice to have everyone together." I checked my calendar. I should be able to make that. Michael's back from Seattle by then. Would it be all right if he joined us? "Of course," she said. The easy acceptance another mark of our new normal. In the past, bringing someone to family gatherings had involved complicated negotiations and unspoken judgments. Now it was simply a matter of practical planning. After we hung up, I spent some time working on a new watercolor, inspired by photos from my recent weekend hiking trip. The process absorbed me completely, mixing colors, applying washes, adding details with careful brushstrokes. This creative practice had become an important part of my life, providing both meditative focus and expressive outlet. The painting gradually took shape, a mountain landscape with dramatic cloud formations, rendered in soft blues and purples, with touches of gold where sunlight broke through. Not a masterpiece, perhaps, but honest and satisfying. Like the life I'd built since that turning point 5 years ago. Authentic, balanced, increasingly confident in its own expression. Sunday afternoon found me at a local coffee shop, waiting for Jason to discuss the duplex investment. He arrived right on time, carrying a folder of materials and looking more relaxed than I remembered from our childhood. Fatherhood and a more secure marriage had softened his competitive edge, while his construction business had provided the sense of accomplishment he'd always craved. "I brought the inspection report and comparable sales data," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "The location is what makes it special. Walking distance to campus, on the bus line, close to that new grocery store development." We spent an hour reviewing numbers, discussing potential challenges, and outlining a possible partnership structure. The conversation was focused and professional, occasionally lightened by shared references or inside jokes that only siblings would understand. The blend felt right, acknowledging our family connection without letting it override sound business considerations. "One more thing," Jason said as we prepared to leave. "Dad mentioned you're concerned about the commercial property's HVAC system. I know a guy who specializes in retrofitting older buildings. Could give you a good rate. No pressure, just an option if you're interested." The offer was presented correctly, as helpful information rather than an obligation or intrusion. Another small indicator of how far we'd come in understanding appropriate boundaries. "Thanks, I'd appreciate that contact," I said, genuinely grateful for the resource. "And I'll let you know about the duplex by Wednesday. Need to review the cash flow projections once more." He nodded, respecting my process rather than pushing for an immediate commitment. As we walked to our cars, conversation shifting to his daughter's upcoming science fair project, I felt a deep appreciation for this rebuilt relationship, the shared history providing richness, the established boundaries providing safety. The following Thursday evening, I picked up Michael on the way to dinner at Jason and Emily's house. He looked tired but happy after his conference, his enthusiasm for new sustainable design concepts spilling over into animated descriptions as we drove. "Sorry," he said eventually, laughing at his own excitement. "I've been talking nonstop. How was your week?" I filled him in on the commercial property decision, moving forward with a counteroffer, the duplex investment with Jason, tentatively agreeing to a 60-40 partnership, and my latest painting progress. His attentive listening was one of the qualities I valued most, genuine interest without judgment or competition. "How are you feeling about the family dinner?" he asked as we neared Jason's neighborhood. Michael had met my family several times over the past year, gradually being integrated into gatherings without pressure or fanfare. "Good," I replied, realizing I meant it. "These dinners aren't performative anymore. Everyone's more authentic now, even when it's messy." He nodded, understanding what I meant without requiring detailed explanation, another gift of our relationship. Jason and Emily's home was warm with conversation and cooking aromas when we arrived. My parents were already there, chatting with Emily's parents in the living room while the children showed off their latest projects. The scene was ordinary but meaningful, 3 generations connected by choice rather than obligation. My father approached as we entered, offering a handshake to Michael and a brief nod to me that conveyed both welcome and respect. My mother followed with warmer greetings, her natural affection now expressed freely without my father's constraining influence. Throughout dinner, I observed the subtle dynamics between family members, my father deferring to my mother's storytelling rather than interrupting, Jason acknowledging Emily's contributions to their business decisions, the children included in conversations at an appropriate level. Not perfect or scripted, but balanced in a way that allowed everyone space to be themselves. After the meal, as the adults lingered at the table with coffee and dessert, the conversation turned to future plans. Emily's parents were considering a move closer to their grandchildren. My mother was exploring opportunities to teach quilting at a community arts program. My father mentioned expanding his mentoring work to include veterans transitioning to civilian careers. "What about you, Sarah?" Emily's father asked. "Jason mentioned you're building quite an impressive real estate portfolio." Before I could answer, my father spoke up. "Sarah's always had a good eye for value and potential. Gets that from her mother, not me." He smiled slightly, the self-deprecating humor another evolution from the man who once claimed credit for every family's success. I described my current projects briefly, then shifted the focus to Michael's sustainable design work, more comfortable now with both acknowledging my accomplishments and sharing attention appropriately. The conversation flowed easily between topics, each person contributing without any single voice dominating. Later, as Michael and I drove home under a canopy of stars, he reached across to take my hand. "I like your family," he said simply. "They've got their quirks, but there's something real there, especially now." "Especially now," I agreed, thinking of the contrast between these genuine gatherings and the performance-based interactions of the past. "It took work to get here. Still takes work sometimes." "Most things worth having do," he observed, squeezing my hand lightly. Back at my house, we sat on the porch swing, enjoying the mild evening in comfortable silence. My neighborhood was quiet, but not isolated, with occasional dog walkers passing by and distant sounds of children playing in a nearby yard. A life I had built deliberately, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. "I've been thinking," Michael said after a while, his voice thoughtful rather than anxious. "My lease is up in 3 months. I'm not suggesting we rush anything, but maybe we could talk about whether it makes sense to consider living together at some point. No pressure, just something to think about." The suggestion hung in the air between us, significant but not demanding. 5 years ago, such a proposition would have triggered immediate anxiety. How would it affect my ability to support my parents? Would it threaten the delicate family balance? Would sharing space mean losing myself in someone else's needs? Now, those fears felt distant. I had proven to myself and others that I could establish and maintain healthy boundaries. I had created financial independence that couldn't easily be compromised. I had built relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. "I'd like to think about that," I said, leaning against his shoulder. "It's a good thing to consider." As we sat watching fireflies appear in the gathering darkness, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. That painful moment in my parents' living room had been a turning point, but not an ending. It had been the beginning of a long process of recalibration, internal and external, personal and relational. Some might still question whether canceling those payments had been too drastic, too abrupt. They might suggest more gradual approaches, more careful explanations, more generous transitions. But I understood what perhaps they couldn't. That some patterns are too entrenched to be gently shifted. Some imbalances require decisive correction before new growth can begin. The mortgage payments hadn't just been about money. They had been about worth, about voice, about place within a family system. By continuing to pay while being devalued, I had been participating in my own diminishment. By stopping, I had declared not just financial independence, but personal sovereignty. 5 years later, the results spoke for themselves. My parents had found authentic footing, building a life based on actual resources rather than appearances. My brother and I had established a relationship of mutual respect rather than comparative resentment. My own life had expanded beyond family roles to include creative expression, meaningful work, genuine partnership. Most importantly, I had discovered that family love, when true, survives truth-telling. It may falter, may require reconstruction, may look different than expected, but it emerges stronger for having faced reality rather than maintaining comfortable illusions. As Michael and I eventually moved inside, the night deepening around us, I carried this knowledge like a quiet certainty. The path forward would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities for both connection and boundary setting. But I would meet them from a place of grounded strength, no longer defined by what I gave or withheld, but by who I chose to be. Some might call what I did 5 years ago walking away from family responsibility. I know it was walking towards something far more important, the possibility of authentic relationship with others and with myself. And in that walking, in that brave and necessary step, I found not just a house of my own, but a home within myself that no one could take away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.